Rex Ryan came in swinging. On national television, the former head coach turned analyst launched into a scathing takedown of Shedeur Sanders, blasting the young quarterback's maturity, character, and NFL readiness. The criticism wasn't just harsh, it was personal. Ryan questioned whether Sanders had the emotional discipline to handle the league, calling his behavior childish and disrespectful. The target? A third-string quarterback who...
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Hadn't even taken a professional snap yet. And that's what made what happened next so surreal. Shedeur Sanders didn't fire back. He didn't tweet, clap back in an interview, or drop a dramatic Instagram story. Instead, he walked into a press conference, took his seat, and mimed. Literally. He pantomimed like he was trapped in an invisible box, offering not a single word in response to the media storm swirling around him. The internet exploded. Critics doubled down. Was this performance art? Was he mocking the media? Or worse, was he proving Rex Ryan right? Then came Mary Kay Cabot, one of the most respected insiders covering the Cleveland Browns. Cabot flipped the script. She stepped in and defended Sanders, not by excusing his actions, but by explaining them. According to her, what looked like a joke was actually a calculated move. She framed the silent act as a strategy, an intentional decision to rise above the noise rather than wade into it. Sanders, she argued, understood the power of restraint, especially in a media environment where every word can become a headline. In Cabot's eyes, the mime routine wasn't immaturity, it was maturity in disguise. And that's where the whole conversation shifted. Because suddenly, Sanders wasn't the punchline anymore. He was a young athlete stuck in a brutal spot, once a college football phenom, now sitting third string on the Browns roster behind veterans, all while carrying the weight of the Sanders name. That silence? Maybe it wasn't mockery. Maybe it was the only move left for a 22-year-old trying to keep his composure while the football world picked him apart. Rex Ryan's rant now looked less like honest analysis and more like a veteran media voice punching down. Sanders didn't escalate. He didn't even speak. And yet, somehow, he became the villain in his own press conference. Cabot's defense forced a closer look, not just at Sanders' mime act, but at the double standard in how young black athletes are dissected in the media. If a seasoned quarterback had done the same thing, would it be labeled immature? Or would it be praised as clever and media savvy? The entire saga raised a bigger question about what it really means to be mature in the NFL. Is it about playing the press game? Saying all the right things while privately seething? Or is it about choosing your battles? Even if that means turning silence into a statement? Sanders' mime routine, awkward as it may have seemed, said a lot without saying anything. And in an age of hot takes and reaction clips, that might be the most mature move of all. This wasn't just a press conference. It was a masterclass in restraint, a mic drop without a single word spoken. Shedeur Sanders walked in, sat down, stared down the questions, and said nothing. Just mime gestures. No eye rolls, no slick comebacks, no sound bites. Just silence, so loud it echoed. Why? Because just days earlier, former NFL coach and current talking head Rex Ryan decided to take aim. Not just at Shedeur's game, but at his character. On national TV, Rex Ryan questioned Shedeur's maturity, his readiness, his entire persona, and didn't just stop at football. He went straight for the personal, suggesting Shedeur wasn't cut out for the NFL spotlight, that he lacked the poise and professionalism required at the highest level. And just like that, the narrative was off and running. Clips of Ryan's critique flooded sports media, and fans were split. Some echoed Ryan's sentiment. Others knew better. But Shedeur? He didn't take the bait. He didn't defend himself. He didn't fire back. He mimed. Literally. At his next press conference, Shedeur silently mimicked speaking, shrugged, pointed to his chest, then gestured for people to move on. No words, just attitude. A physical metaphor that said more than any quote ever could. And that's when the discourse exploded. Some critics pounced immediately, calling it immature, disrespectful, unprofessional. They painted Shadur as a diva in decline, once a Heisman hopeful, now a third-string QB pulling stunts for attention. But not everyone was buying that version of the story. Enter Mary Kay Cabot, one of the most respected insiders covering the Cleveland Browns and the NFL at large. Mary Kay wasn't just watching from the sidelines. She was listening between the lines. And what she saw in Shadur's silent act wasn't immaturity. It was strategy. While others dismissed the mime routine as childish, Cabot defended it as calculated. She pointed out the obvious. Shadur's in a rough spot. He's a former high-profile prospect, now relegated to third-string status. A quarterback with more expectations than playing time. And still, in the face of personal attacks from a veteran analyst, he chose silence. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood the stakes. According to Mary Kay, this wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a controlled performance. Shadur knew anything he said could and would be used against him. He knew that clapping back at Rex Ryan would spark another round of hot takes. So, instead, he went silent. Strategic silence. It was maturity disguised as defiance. Shadur didn't escalate. He didn't whine. He didn't feed the machine. He just let it sit. And by doing that, he flipped the narrative on its head. Because here's the reality. Shadur's in one of the most mentally challenging positions in football. He's not just fighting for a roster spot. He's fighting against perception. He's the son of Deion Sanders, a former Heisman candidate, and someone who's been under the microscope his entire career. Going from college star to third-string backup? That's not just a football shift. That's an emotional gut punch. It's humbling. And yet, he hasn't imploded. He hasn't lashed out. He's just kept working. And Mary Kay Cabot sees that. She doesn't just see the player. She sees the person navigating an enormous identity shift, doing his best to stay grounded while veterans take cheap shots on TV. That's where Rex Ryan went wrong. Ryan didn't critique Shadur's play. He went personal. He used his platform not for analysis, but for attack. He questioned Sanders' character, not just his mechanics. And in doing so, he overstepped. Because there's a line between holding players accountable and making it personal. And when it's a young player, still finding his footing, trying to navigate setbacks with some shred of dignity, those shots can feel cheap. Rex Ryan crossed that line. And in response, Shadur didn't say a word. It's worth saying again, he could have. He had every reason to fire back. He's been under immense pressure. He's been buried in the depth chart. And then comes this guy, who hasn't coached a team in over a decade, dismissing his professionalism on national television. But Shadur didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, he controlled the narrative without uttering a single syllable. And that's why Mary Kay Cabot's defense mattered. She saw what others missed, that silence can be power, that the decision to not engage is often harder than any rebuttal, especially when you're young. Especially when your name alone draws criticism. Cabot didn't frame Shadur as a victim. She framed him as aware, as someone who knows the weight his words carry, someone who understands that one wrong comment could derail the little momentum he has left, someone who's choosing to protect his image, not inflame it. And that kind of media savvy? That's not immaturity. That's leadership. Let's also talk about what being third string really means for someone like Shadur. This isn't just about riding the bench. It's about internalizing disappointment while the world watches. It's about answering questions with a smile when you're not even sure if you'll see the field this season. It's about staying ready while getting none of the glory. And still, through all of it, he hasn't cracked. He hasn't called out coaches. He hasn't slammed reporters. He's stayed composed, even as others try to reduce him to a narrative of arrogance and failure. That's not immature. That's resilience. Rex Ryan, with all his experience, should know better. He's been around enough young quarterbacks to understand what pressure looks like, what frustration does to someone. And instead of offering constructive advice, he chose to go low. But the backlash came quick. Because in 2025, fans are tired of seeing analysts attack players personally and call it critique. They want accountability from the media too. And when someone like Mary Kay Cabot speaks up, someone with real credibility, someone who actually covers the locker room, people listen. Her defense didn't excuse every move Shedur's made. It acknowledged the complexity of it. It recognized the tension young athletes live with. It asked for nuance. And in today's sports media ecosystem, nuance is revolutionary. What Shedur did wasn't perfect. It wasn't traditional. But it wasn't immature. It was different. It was deliberate. And it was powerful. And now, the story has shifted again. What started as a scandal, a gotcha moment, has become a conversation about restraint, about media responsibility, and about how young athletes navigate storms they didn't start. Rex Ryan may have started this mess, but he's not the one shaping the aftermath. That's up to people like Mary Kay Cabot and Shedur Sanders, and everyone watching who knows that silence can speak louder than outrage. So what now? Shedur goes back to work. He keeps showing up, keeps proving himself in the film room, on the field, and in the locker room. And when his number's called, he'll be ready. And if there's one thing this whole moment made clear, it's that he doesn't need to talk to win the room. He already has the one thing every quarterback needs most, control. So let's talk. Did Rex Ryan cross the line? Was Shedur's silent response brilliant or out of bounds? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more breakdowns of the wildest media moments, PR faceplants, and athlete clapbacks, hit that subscribe button. Because in today's sports world, the drama isn't just on the field. It's in every press conference, every hot take, and every silent stare that says more than words ever could. Let's call this what it was, a moment of clarity in a media storm designed to break young players down. Rex Ryan took his shot. Loud, pointed, and personal. A full-on character assassination under the bright lights of a national broadcast. And then Shedur Sanders responded without even opening his mouth. And that's what made it sting. That's what made it memorable. Because Shedur didn't yell. He didn't snap. He didn't go off on a tangent or get defensive like so many athletes do when their names get dragged through the mud. He sat down in front of reporters and acted out a message. Calm. Controlled. Deliberate. He mimed. A full-on performance. Silent, expressive, and yes, a little cheeky, but also deeply intentional. Because if he had spoken, that would have been a headline. If he had pushed back, it would have been Shedur lashes out. If he had fired back at Rex Ryan directly, the media would have painted him as sensitive, volatile, immature. Instead, he took all of that away. He removed the bait and flipped the script. And now, the narrative doesn't belong to Rex Ryan anymore. It belongs to Shedur. That's power. You see, what Mary Kay Cabot recognized, and what so many others missed, was that this wasn't just about Rex Ryan saying mean things. It was about a young quarterback learning how to carry his name, his pressure, and his potential under a microscope most of us can't even imagine. Shedur Sanders isn't just another player. He's not an undrafted backup with nothing to lose. He's the son of Deion Sanders. He grew up in the center of attention. And now, in the NFL, he's trying to write his own chapter. But every page is being torn apart by critics who think the name alone gives them permission to judge the man behind it. And that's why this hit different. Rex Ryan didn't just criticize his mechanics or footwork or football IQ. He questioned his maturity, his character, his readiness to lead. That wasn't analysis. That was a takedown dressed up as commentary. Now let's be honest, Shedur's not perfect. He's a third-string QB on a team that's struggling to find its rhythm. He was a Heisman-caliber star in college and is now facing the brutal reality of the NFL. It doesn't care who you were. Everyone starts over. Everyone eats dirt before they get fed. But what Rex failed to acknowledge is how hard that transition is. How emotionally draining it is to go from being the man to being a clipboard holder. How humiliating it can be to show up every day with cameras still in your face, knowing you're not even suiting up on Sunday. And yet, Shedur hasn't cracked. He hasn't lashed out at coaches. He hasn't blamed his teammates. He hasn't quit. That matters. But the moment he responds with anything other than forced humility, the world's ready to pounce. Oh, he's arrogant. Oh, he's immature. Oh, he's not ready. And that's the double standard Mary Kay Cabot called out. Because when other quarterbacks push back, when veterans show frustration, they're described as fiery or passionate. But when Shedeur uses body language instead of words, he's branded a diva. Let's not pretend this doesn't come with cultural baggage. Black quarterbacks have always had to walk a tighter rope. Be charismatic, but not too confident. Be humble, but still a leader. Be everything, but also nothing too much. And Shedeur knows that. You can see it in how carefully he moves, how calculated he is in front of the media. That's not immaturity. That's survival. So when Mary Kay Cabot stood up for him, she wasn't excusing the mime act. She was contextualizing it. She looked past the optics and saw the mental game behind it. This wasn't about trying to be funny or disrespectful. It was about taking control of a situation that could have easily spiraled into another media circus. And to Rex Ryan's credit, yes, even he realized he misfired. The tone softened after Cabot's take started making the rounds. The volume dropped. The backpedaling began. Because that's what happens when someone credible, not a teammate, not a family member, but an actual NFL reporter with access, insight, and integrity, defends a player with nuance. It changes the conversation. Cabot wasn't emotional. She wasn't playing favorites. She was stating facts. Shedeur's been under immense pressure. He's handled that pressure with professionalism. And he's earned the benefit of the doubt. Because let's be real, if this exact same situation had happened to any other young quarterback, if some retired coach turned analyst had launched a personal attack, and the QB had shrugged it off in silence, people would have called him classy, mature, media savvy. But Shedeur does it, and suddenly it's a crisis? No, that's not how this works. Mary Kay made sure to reframe the entire moment for what it really was. Not a tantrum, not a meltdown, not a player cracking under pressure. It was a lesson in restraint. And that lesson? It ended up reflecting more poorly on Rex Ryan than it did on Shedeur. Because Ryan wasn't punching up, he was punching down. He used his platform to come after a kid who isn't even starting right now. A kid who's still figuring it out. A kid who's trying to earn his place, quietly, in a league that doesn't hand out grace very often. And when the kid answered in silence, the entire room felt it. This is bigger than one press conference. It's about how we treat young athletes. It's about how we hold media voices accountable for the things they say about players who can't say much back. It's about the balance between criticism and cruelty, and knowing the difference. Because Shedeur Sanders is still growing. He's not where he wants to be. But he's trying. He's showing up. And he's doing it under pressure most of us couldn't handle for a week, let alone an entire season. That's worth some respect. And Mary Kay Cabot knew it. She said what needed to be said, and nothing more. And in doing so, she brought the temperature down. She reminded people that behind the headlines and viral moments, there's a 22-year-old just trying to find his place in the league. Not a villain, not a prima donna, just a young man trying not to drown in the weight of a name, a league, and a spotlight that never turns off. So now we're here. Rex Ryan said too much. Shedeur Sanders said nothing. And Mary Kay Cabot said exactly what needed to be heard. That's the real story. And if you're still focused on whether miming was too extra, you're missing the whole point. It's easy to dismiss Shedeur Sanders' mime routine as a one-off stunt, something quirky to go viral for a few hours and fade by next news cycle. But that would miss the entire point. This wasn't just a reaction. This was a revelation. What happened in that press conference wasn't about Rex Ryan anymore. It was about the kind of pressure cooker young NFL players get tossed into the second they walk through the tunnel. Especially ones with famous last names, camera crews in their face, and expectations on their back that could break a veteran in half. Shedeur didn't crack. He performed. And more importantly, he controlled the narrative without letting the narrative control him. Think about the position he's in. He's not a starting QB. He's not even QB2 right now. He's the third stringer. He's at the bottom of a chart, but still the first name in every headline. Still the one people love to debate, pick apart, and challenge, Not because he's failed, but because he hasn't arrived fast enough for their taste. And that's the trap, right? If Shadur claps back, he's entitled. If he stays silent, he's immature. If he mimics instead of speaks, he's unprofessional. There is no winning unless you take the game out of their hands. And that's what he did. That mime routine? That was a control move. That was Shadur Sanders taking back his story. He didn't speak, because the minute he speaks, every word becomes a clip, a quote, a headline. But silence? Silence throws people off. Silence creates questions. And that right there is how you own a room. Because Rex Ryan can rant all day. He can foam at the mouth on ESPN about character and professionalism. But he has no control over what people remember. And what they'll remember is Shadur sitting at that podium, looking calm, looking composed, and letting the critics spin in circles while he gave them nothing to chew on. That's media strategy 101. And for a 22-year-old who's been dogged all season long, that's not immaturity. That's media fluency. Mary Kay Cabot was the only high-profile voice in the room who recognized that. She didn't just defend him. She translated the moment for the people who didn't get it. She saw the nuance. She saw the restraint. She saw a young man who didn't act out, didn't blow up, didn't break, and chose, deliberately, to not feed the outrage machine. Because the outrage machine was in full swing. After Rex Ryan's rant, everyone jumped in. Sports radio callers, analysts, Twitter trolls, even some former players. The pylon was vicious, loud, and entirely predictable. They weren't talking about Shadur's arm strength or film study. They were talking about vibes, about attitude, about whether he looked like a leader. You know, the coded stuff, the subjective critiques that somehow always land hardest on young black quarterbacks who dare to carry themselves with confidence and boundaries. And once again, Shadur saw the trap. He didn't push back. He didn't apologize. He just did something else entirely. And the moment he did, the conversation shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about what Rex said. It was about how Shadur responded. Suddenly, the critics had to work harder to justify their outrage. Because you can't drag someone who gives you nothing back. And that silence? It echoed. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. People started asking the question Rex Ryan should have asked from the beginning. Why is a third-string quarterback handling media pressure better than some guys who've been in the league for a decade? That's the part they don't want to talk about. That's the piece Mary Kay Cabot put into focus. That we're not just watching a player trying to get playing time. We're watching a young man managing expectations, legacy, criticism, and the full weight of the media spotlight without flinching. So, yeah, Rex Ryan might have felt good about his rant for a few hours. But as soon as Shadur went silent, it was his words that aged badly. The personal shots didn't land. The immaturity angle fell flat. The mob got quiet. Because there's nothing louder than silence when it's delivered with purpose. Now Shadur goes back to the work. He continues to grind. He watches film. He waits his turn. And when it comes, he'll be ready, not just as a quarterback, but as a professional who knows how to weather storms before they hit. Because that's what this moment proved. That he's not just talented, he's measured. He's not just famous, he's focused. And he doesn't need to talk to make noise. So let's settle it right here. Was Shadur Sanders out of line for the mime act? No. Was it a bit unconventional? Sure. But did it show that he's thinking about the long game, while others are reacting to the short-term chaos? Absolutely. And that's something Rex Ryan couldn't see, but Mary Kay Cabot did. And now, so does everyone else. Drop your take in the comments. Was Shadur's silence genius or reckless? Did Rex Ryan deserve the backlash? And should more young athletes take control of their narrative the way Shadur just did? Let us know below and hit that subscribe button. Because in this league, the games don't end on the field. They continue at the podium, in the headlines, and in every single moment where you choose not to take the bait.